Today's video is in reference to Father's Day. I wrote Mitchell a Happy Father's Day letter, and I thought it was really good, so I figured I would share it because I think there are principles that other people could use if they want to write an encouragement for their fathers or the father of their children. So I thought I would share it now before Father's Day so that if people are also encouraged by it, well, they could pull parts from it to use in their Father's Day cards. Also, there's parts of it that me, Mitchell, and Ryan once had. Ryan started a work study when we were all working at Duke Energy, and there's parts in this that tie into that. So to close up those loose ends, I'm also sharing this publicly so that Ryan can be benefited from it. So that's why I'm sharing it publicly. This is what it looks like written. I like writing more than my PowerPoints. It's just something unique about the process of writing versus planning out PowerPoints. But happy Father's Day, Mitchell. I am thankful to God for all of the ways in which you are a good example and a blessing to our children. We, humans, are creatures of imitation. We do what we see others doing, and we say what we hear others saying. And the most influential person is one's father or one's mother, our parents, our upbringing. Even Jesus, the greatest man to have ever lived, was bound to these limitations. He says, I do the works that I see with my Father. I say what I hear from my Father. Even Jesus was bound and limited to imitating, to doing and saying that which he, saw God doing and that which he, heard God saying, either from his word or, God's works in creation. Jesus was imitating the living God, doing his works and speaking his words. God had given him a commandment, what to do and what to say. So it's like even Jesus, the greatest man to have ever lived, it's like he was bound to these limitations of simply being an imitator of the living God. God is the creator and sustainer of all of creation, its realms and its inhabitants. Acts 14:17. All of the power and strength a man possesses is of God. 1 Chronicles 29:10-13. Our omnipotent God, who fuels every star and upholds every galaxy and constellation, Psalm 8:3 and Job 38:31-33, uses his power to empower those weaker than him, everything and everyone. Job 8:36 and Psalm 8:4. There are many ways in which men are more powerful than women. They have a deeper and louder voice and typically a taller and more muscular build. Being entrusted with this power, they're able to do much good, and they are also able to do much evil or do much harm or do much destruction. It all depends on the will of the man and whether they choose to serve self or serve God, which is done by imitating his example and serving those weaker than you. If one wants to serve God, imitating God is how, when you serve other image bearers and when you serve those that are weaker than yourself, you're serving God because you're imitating God. You're following his example. You're obeying his commands. This is the creative order we see in creation. God is all powerful, and he only serves those weaker than him. So imitating, the command, that work, that example we see in creation, well, that's how one serves God, by serving image bearers and serving those weaker than yourself. And it all depends on the will of man, what man desires to do. whether, a man will be a source of much blessings or a source of much cursings, whether they will do good or do evil. Whether they choose to serve self or serve God, which is done by imitating his example and serving those weaker than you. James 1:27, James 4, 1 through 10, Proverbs 31, 8 through 9, Hebrews 13, 16. God empowers man according to each man's own ability. We are our own worst enemy and biggest hindrance for why God withholds greater blessings or why God removes blessings that he once gave. If a man is weak-willed, lacking the strength to resist Satan's temptations, and lacking the compassion and mercy to want to help and serve the poor, weak, and needy, then he is the cause for why his rule and reign remains small and limited. The greater the man in the eyes of God, the greater the power, rule, authority, and influence. Every time you respond to someone asking for help and actually help them in the way they need, you are acting like God and proclaiming the name of God by your works, and you are functioning as king to them. Psalm 5, verses 1 through 2. I pray that God will continue to give you the strength to serve in this way, and thereby provide for Gloria and Barnabas one of their greatest needs, a good example of godliness to imitate. It's like knowing that we are creatures of imitation. It's like the greatest need our children have is having, being provided an example of godliness for them to imitate, instead of commanding them to do good, well, doing good yourself so that they can imitate what they see. It's like that's what our children need to be provided for the most. I'm thankful that your line of work is one that is in alignment with the living God, which is providing power to those who need it. I think that's, I'm thankful that, when Barnabas and Gloria grow up, when they look at the work that you do, it's like, Daddy is glorifying the living God because the work that Dad does is the work that God does. God distributes power and help to those who need it. God is omnipotent. God is the origin and source of all power. And God strengthens and empowers man. God distributes power to those who need it. And it's like, that's what Daddy does. That's one way Daddy's like the living God. And that is what makes your service also worship. And this is what ties into the work study that we did with Ryan. Me, you, and Ryan, and we had that work study, and Ryan was talking about serving, and there's this Greek word, latreu, that you love. You really love that word. And you like the Greek phrase doulos to latreo, like from slave to servant. It's like, well, what makes our service worship? Well, when our works are in alignment with the living God, well, that's what makes it worship. That is what makes your service also worship. When you serve humanity in a way that imitates the living God, well, you're worshiping God. You are, that's one way in which, like when your works are in alignment with the living God, you're worshiping him. That's one way your character and nature is in alignment with the living God. And it's like with the Israelites, it's like they exchanged their glory for the image of oxen. And it's like they worshiped and served the creation rather than creator. It's like the Israelites, they were stiff-necked, so it's like their character and nature was conformed more to like the golden ox. Instead of being conformed to the living God, it's like, well, they were worshiping the ox. Their character and nature was, you become what you worship. Hashtag GK Beal. So it's like The Israelites, they worshipped this oxen, and then it's like they became stiff-necked, like oxen. So they exchanged their glory for the glory of the creation. They were worshiping the creation rather than the creator. So when your works are, and when your character and nature is in alignment with the living God, well, that's how you're worshiping God. So at your job, it's like when you serve humanity in a way that imitates the living God, well, you're also worshiping the living God in that way. So that's what makes your service worship, when your works are also like in alignment with the works of the living God. So you're gonna like that, Mitchell. I know you love that word. His iPhone is named that word, like on the Bluetooth, hook up to a phone, it's like doulos to latreo. He really likes that Greek word. So you're gonna love this. Be blessed. I hope you realize that for all of the ways in which you served Mark, I hope you realize that for all of the ways in which you served Mark and were a blessing to Mark, giving of your own time, energy, money, and abilities, both mental and physical. You served with the media, you served with like permitting, with their land stuff, you served physically, you ran wires, you moved stuff, you installed stuff. You served Mark with your all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Maybe not soul, but you served Mark with all of your mind, heart, and strength. Your mental capabilities, your physical capabilities. So I hope you realize that for all the ways in which you served Mark and were a blessing to Mark, you proved yourself to be greater than Mark and more powerful than Mark. Hebrews 7:7, where it says, the lesser is blessed by the greater. So for all of these ways in which you've been a blessing to Mark, that shows how you're greater. To the extent that you're able to contribute, that testifies of who you are. Mark's just on the receiving end of everyone serving him. What does he contribute? I don't know. But you shouldn't treat the people who support you, you shouldn't mistreat them. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. Like when you spitefully use people, it's like, oh, they're serving me because I'm great. But it's like one's like, to the extent that one is able to contribute, that testifies of how great they are. So stop mistreating the people that uphold you and support you, and sustain you. So for all the times in which you've blessed Mark, you proved yourself to be greater than Mark and more powerful than Mark. Every time that Mark has asked you for help, he was also confessing you to be king. For Mark to come to you and say, like, Mitchell, I need your help. Can you serve in this way? Well, he's saying that you have, he has a need and you have the power to fulfill his need. And that's what makes Jesus king. And that's what makes God king. God answers, our cries for help. He responds to them. So when someone comes and asks for help, it's like with asking for help, they're saying, it's like a confession, you're king. You have the power. You're greater than me. I'm weak in this area and you're more powerful in this area, and I need your help. I need your power to help me in my weakness. When someone asks you for help, that's what they're confessing. They're saying you're greater. You have more power. And I'm weak, so I need your, power to help me. So every time that Mark has asked you for help, he was also confessing you to be king, not him. It's one of the biggest effing jokes that Mark would refuse our reconciliation attempts. When we went back there on a Sunday and asked, try to reconcile with Mark to forgive us for what we did on August 6th, and he refused to forgive us. I sought reconciliation. There are ways in which I sought reconciliation individually, and there are ways that Mitchell and I both sought reconciliation together with Mark, and he denied everything. Yep, it's one of the biggest effing jokes that Mark would refuse our reconciliation attempts over the ways in which we participated in August 6th. Myself speaking and you handing me the mic. Because Mitchell helped with media and ran a mic to a couple of people. It's like Mitchell needs to repent of that sin. And when Mitchell was with me and we've gone to Mark to seek forgiveness, it's like Mark has withheld forgiveness. Mark has denied reconciliation with Mitchell, and Mark has denied reconciliation with me. So for Mitchell's sin of running the mic around on August 6th, that for Mark to see that and then cut you off, like considering the ways that, you know, you've contributed to him and served him and have been a blessing with him, that's the biggest joke I've ever seen. Truly, his narcissistic discard of you is only a testimony of who he is. Your value doesn't change. So just because Mark refuses to grant you forgiveness over this gnat, he's straining at gnats, and Mark has withheld forgiveness and refuses to be reconciled, that's a testimony of who Mark is, considering all the ways in which Mitchell has been a blessing to you, Mark, with his time, his energy, his resources, his money. And because he ran a mic around to a couple people on August 6th, you withhold forgiveness and you keep him shut out and you cut him off from your congregation. It's like he was a source of blessings for all of your congregation. It's like now the people in your congregation, it's like they're also cut off from ways in which Mitchell has blessed them. It's like, it's a sinking ship that Mark's the captain of, when it's like you cut off these people, these valuable people, and you refuse their attempts at reconciling. Well, you're just causing your congregation to suffer. Now they have to pick up these extra burdens, and now they're not receiving blessings that Mitchell was able to bring or that I could have brought. It's like now it's like you're so oblivious to how the people under your authority also suffer from your actions. Yeah. It's like, no, I'm going to cut off Mitchell and Rebecca and I'm going to refuse their reconciliation attempts. And I don't care how that affects the other people in my congregation and what they're going to have to go without and what they're going to have to suffer and the extra burdens they're going to have to bear. You're an oppressor. You are Pharaoh. Everyone supports you and you contribute nothing. And then you cut off the biggest contributors because you have the power to do so and you don't care how, like, cutting them off, how that affects the rest of the body. So oblivious to the burdens that your congregation is bearing and like what they're contributing to you and what they're contributing to each other. It's a big joke. Once you realize that, like once you have a self-awareness of your value and what you're able to provide and the ways in which you're a blessing to other people, well, how other people treat you, that testifies of who they are. That says more about them than what it does about you. So, hashtag know your worth. That is of God. Yep, truly his narcissistic discard of you is only a testimony of who he is. Your value doesn't change. Mitchell's very valuable. I recognize that. I see the good. I can see the good and bad in people. It's not like if someone does me wrong, I'm completely oblivious to the ways in which God has distributed good to them and, you know, goodness still abides in them. I know Mitchell is very valuable. And regardless of ways in which he carried out his position as husband, he was a great deacon. He was a great deacon. So for Mark to treat you the way that he treated you says more about Mark than about you. So God bless you, Mitchell. I don't know to what extent you may still be suffering from back and nerve pain. Mitchell, for a long time, has suffered from back pain. That's why he got that little inversion table to stretch out his back, and that's something that he's been dealing with a lot, is back pain due to like a pinched nerve. I don't know to what extent you may still be suffering from back nerve pain, but I pray that God would bring you healing, relief, and comfort. Historically, you have been faithful to use your physical strength in service to those who are in need. So I pray that God would remove this hindrance that at times keeps you from performing that good work, service, sacrifice, and act of worship towards Him. Historically, Mitchell has been faithful with the use of his physical strength and using it to serve others. And that's meekness, and that's humility, using your power in service to those who are weak, as opposed to using your power in service to yourself at the expense of those who are weak. So historically, with the use of your physical strength, well, in that aspect, you've been faithful to use it in service to others. I know your back pain can be a hindrance to that, so I pray that God would remove it so that you can continue that act of worship and service towards God. Central Florida needs you to be physically fit and fully capable. Mitchell works for the power company. He goes out into the field when there's a hurricane, and during power restoration, it's a lot of physical labor, a lot of walking, a lot of moving, a lot of being active. And because Central Florida really depends on electricity and power and our AC, well, Central Florida needs you to be physically fit and fully capable. And our children need you to be physically fit. And I need you to be physically fit because I love our kids, and it's helpful for me for when you're helpful to our children. So I also need you to be physically fit for the sake of our children, and not hindered by back pain. So it's in everybody's best interest that Mitchell doesn't suffer from back pain. So I pray that my righteous Father would be faithful to grant this request, knowing that it is in accord with His will. And I believe that He will. But if He doesn't, I trust that God is good. I only see a certain portion of what's at work, so I believe that God will answer this prayer to heal your back pain, because you've been, faithful with the use of your physical strength. But, I think there are ways in which you are still maybe unfaithful with the use of other strengths and powers that you have. So God might withhold, physical healing because of ways in which you're using your mental strength, your verbal strength. So the Lord of all the earth will do right. But I pray that God will heal your back. And, yeah. And that prayer is in accord with the living God. God, Mitchell has been faithful with the use of his physical strength. So, yep. Again, happy Father's Day. In peace, Rebecca. So, that's the encouragement I wrote to Mitchell for Father's Day. Other people can kind of pull from that. You just have to consider, like for Father's Day, ways in which fathers provide for their children. Well, what ways are they good examples? What ways are they imitating the living God? Instead of just commanding them to do these things, what ways are fathers actually doing them? What ways are fathers modeling character and conduct that's in accord with the living God? What ways are fathers proclaiming who God is by their works, not just by their words? And then if, fathers have a job, It's like, what ways are their jobs in alignment with the living God? So with Mitchell, it's easy. He works for the power company, and God is, God distributes power. So you just kind of have to think ways in which, fathers, their jobs, their secular work. Well, how is their secular work like the works of the living God? God is the living God. So it's like God is the origin and source of all life. How, we are to be a means of life to others. All people, the righteous and the unrighteous. So with the works that people do in their jobs, how are they imparting life to others? And it's like, that's a good example for children to imitate. So happy Father's Day, Mitchell. I hope that's encouraging. All my other letters and encouragements have had this tone, and I sometimes you have stated that they aren't encouraging. So if this one's encouraging, I don't know. Maybe it will be, maybe it won't be. I hope it is. I hope it's encouraging. I hope you're blessed for Father's Day. Ryan, I hope you like that part about Latreyu. Tying back to our work study, we'll serve God on this mountain. It's like we worship God by imitating his, works, conforming our character and nature to his character and nature. When we serve others, we're worshiping the living God. So, yeah. That's what makes one's service also an act of worship, when it's in alignment with the living God. So I hope that's helpful. Okay, thanks. Be blessed.